wiring is gone. No doubt. Now you have to be patient, Mrs. Quality work takes time.
Not rushing you.
Okay, so I guess I'm gonna have to do a wee bit of talking here to explain this. So this is the hub carrier. The hub itself sits in the carrier, right? The wheel speed sensor is there. The manual tells you to remove the wheel speed sensor. Well, I was hoping I didn't need to touch that because it is very reluctant to come out. So you don't really need to remove the wheel speed sensor if you're careful. So just give it a tap in the back of the bearing here and it should separate. Now if this is rusted really, really badly, I'm guessing you're gonna have to press this apart, in which case you might have to deal with the wheel speed sensor, possibly disconnect the upline or whatever, but it did come apart with a couple of taps with a hammer, nothing overly violent. And yeah, so carrier and hub. Obviously I'll clean the periphery here and put the new hub into the carrier. Okay, so there's the hub carrier all cleaned up there, guys. Be very careful around the wheel speed sensor here. Okay, that sits in the hub carrier as I mentioned, and the manual says to remove it, but I was struggling to remove it, so I left it in situ. I think you can manage it like that. Clean up the axle, the periphery of the carrier, and the axle flange itself. You want that all nice and flush. I'm going to put some anti-corrosive on that. Use whatever your choice of anti-corrosive is. I'm not here to sell you anything. Yeah, so the old bearing, absolutely knacked. New bearings, you can't even spin them, right? They're so tight. So just a word about the wheel speed sensor here, guys. In the bearing itself is the wheel speed sensor encoder. So this consists of, I don't know if you'll be able to see it here on camera or not, little segments that are essentially magnetic. Let's see if I can get this just in the right spot. Yeah, maybe you can see it there. Yeah, I think you can see it there. You see the little segments? Don't bring anything magnetic near this ring here. This seal on the bearing is the encoder, right? So when you put this in situ, the wheel speed sensor sits right here. And of course, as the bearing spins, the encoder rotates. That's what induces the wheel speed signal into the system. Be particularly careful with this. As I said, don't bring anything magnetic near it. You can actually demagnetize it, and then your wheel speed sensor is buggerized. Then you need a new hub. Well, here's the Timken part number, by the way. Again, it's 2018 all-wheel drive, and this is for the rear hubs only. Read the little pamphlet that comes with your new hub assembly. Might save you some grief. Okay, let's see if we can get us back together. So here's the whole assembly. Here's the torque spec, 47 foot-pounds for the 4 bolts. I've cleaned the bolts up, put a bit of Loctite on them, thread locker. Here's an aftermarket part number for the axle nut. The axle nut is spec'd out here as a spindle nut. Perhaps this is a 2-wheel. Here's the 4-wheel. It's the same drawing in any case. 133 foot-pounds on the axle nut. It says to replace it, and it gives you the detail here to apply a small amount of engine oil to the seating surface of the nut, so on the flange itself, I guess, right? So anyway, there's all the detail. Don't forget to put your splash guard back in place before you assemble it. Yeah, so let's see how this goes. Okay, so the hub looks symmetrical. It isn't. There's 2 little notches, 2 little bumps cast into the flange of the hub, and they line up actually with the splash shield. There's two little notches there, so it has to be oriented. It can only go in one way. Don't ask me how I know that. Yeah, it just happens to be a coincidence that the filming actually stopped. And I found the best way is just to sit the whole rig on your knee, then tap it down until the hub carrier and the hub proper flange comes together and everything lines up. Do what you can to make sure there's no rust or rubbish that's dropped onto the encoder ring, because it's magnetic, it wants to catch any rubbish. Okay, so that's the 4 bolts. Just actually hand tight there, guys. Socket extension still on that. So the 4 bolts, of course. So as you torque this up, of course, the flange here. Sorry, move it too close. The flange between the hub carrier and the hub carrier and the new hub should obviously come together tight. And yeah, when the caliper's back on, that'll be held in place. Don't forget the little 10mm bolt under here if you removed it. So that's just the final torque, guys. 47 foot-pounds. I had run them all up to pre-torque them, and obviously you're going to do it in one shot, ideally, you know, crisscross pattern. You know this. So it's a 32mm socket here, guys. I'm just going to pre-torque this. I'm not going to final torque it until the car's back on the ground, actually. And yeah, just be careful you don't damage your studs on your new hub. That's good. As I said, I'll final torque it when it's on the ground. You've seen me taking off the old nut with the impact. Do not put your new one on with impact, because it can compromise the bearing. That's the last thing you want to do. We skiffed the anti-seize at the contact point there on the inside, on the where the disc is going to interface with the hub itself. You might be the next guy who has to remove it, so you'll thank yourself later. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the brake detail here, guys, because there is a video on the channel on doing the rear brakes if you're interested. Anyway, the caliper bracket mounting bolts are 80 foot-pounds. The pin bolts, if you remove them, 26 foot-pounds. And the lug nuts for the wheel itself are 80 foot-pounds. I tighten them a wee bit tighter because I've had grief with them coming loose in the past. Not on this particular vehicle, but yeah, anyway, I'll leave it up to you. Manual says 80 foot-pounds. Right, pin bolts 26, caliper bracket 80. Make sure the connector for the park brake actuator is locked, of course. The little tab is locked. And put back the harness tie wrap there onto the bracket. Of course, we didn't remove the wheel speed sensor. Okay, so everything's back together, guys. For the super obsessive, the retaining screws on the disc are actually 7 foot-pounds, 8 4-inch-pounds if you want to torque them up to the manual spec. Yeah, double check absolutely everything, and then double check everything again. Somebody's going to ask, so I'll just mention it again. This is no brake video there, guys. if you pop that cap, there is facility. If you use a T46 Torx bit, you can actually manually actuate the park brake actuator. There's a wee bit to that. That's maybe a video in itself, so I'm not going to get into that. Wee bit of detail on the rear brakes video if you want to go check that out. I don't really get into that because, as you've seen, I do have the scan tool. So just to check the wheel speed, the sensor is still healthy in the encoder. I've just got the scan tool set up here. I'll spin the wheel and you can see on the graph, I'm graphing the right rear wheel speed. I can't get up. The scaling is pretty high on the scan tool, but you can see it there. Yeah, that's good. So here, just on the scan tool here, guys, it's the left and right rear wheel speed. The one we replaced is in the blue line, the right, of course.